For most of human history, there were no countries, no borders, no kings, no national flags. If you walked across a valley 30,000 years ago, you weren't entering another nation. You were entering somebody else's hunting ground. And that could get you killed. It's easy to imagine ancient humans living peaceful lives. Small groups wandering through forests, gathering berries, hunting deer, and sitting around campfires every night. But the archaeological evidence tells a much more complicated story. Humans have always been social, but we've also always been territorial. And that's where this story begins, because ancient humans didn't go to war over oil, or politics, or religion. They fought over something much simpler: survival. Imagine you're living during the Ice Age. Your group consists of maybe 30 people. Every hunter matters. Every child matters. Food isn't guaranteed. Water isn't guaranteed. Even surviving the next winter isn't guaranteed. Now imagine the herd of reindeer you've hunted for years suddenly changes its migration route, or a long drought dries up the nearest river, or another tribe reaches the best hunting grounds before you do. Suddenly, your children are hungry. The question isn't whether you want more land. The question is whether your family survives without it. Now here's something surprising. For ancient humans, fighting was probably the last choice, not the first. If your tribe only has 15 or 20 adults capable of hunting, losing even 2 people is devastating, even if you win. The best outcome is usually avoiding violence altogether. Move somewhere else, trade if possible. Wait for the seasons to change. Because every injured hunter weakens the entire group, but nature doesn't always leave you another option. A drought shrinks every water source. Winter kills the game animals. One valley becomes the only reliable place to find food. Now 2 tribes arrive at exactly the same place. Neither group wants a fight. Neither group can afford to leave. Sometimes survival leaves no easy decisions. Now let's talk about territory. Modern people think of land as property. Ancient humans probably thought of it as knowledge. Imagine your grandparents spent decades learning one landscape. You know where fish appear every spring, where edible roots grow after heavy rain, which caves stay warm during winter, where dangerous predators usually roam. That information isn't written in books. It exists only inside human memory. Lose the land, and you lose generations of accumulated knowledge. 2 tribes aren't simply contesting a valley. They're contesting everything that valley has ever encoded into their survival playbook. Now here's where archaeology becomes fascinating. For a long time, many researchers believed organized intergroup pressure began only after farming. Then archaeologists started finding something unexpected: settlement patterns that shifted abruptly, defensive structures built and rebuilt in rapid succession, mass burial sites, but not from violence, rather from what appears to be repeated, concentrated demographic stress over many generations. One of the most famous examples comes from Jebel Sahaba in the Nile Valley. Dating back roughly 13,000 years, the site contains clusters of individuals interred with accompanying lithic artifacts. This suggests not a single event, but persistent recurring pressure from adjacent collectives. Some individuals show signs of having endured multiple episodes of displacement over their lifetimes, meaning they weathered one forced relocation, only to face another later. Think about what that means. This wasn't one isolated incident. It suggests a sustained pattern of territorial renegotiation between neighboring groups. Long before cities, long before kingdoms, long before recorded history. Now here's the important question. Were ancient humans naturally adversarial? Or were they responding to an incredibly unforgiving environment? Imagine your children haven't eaten properly for days. You discover another camp with plentiful food. The calculus of access suddenly looks very different. From their perspective, they're guarding their caloric reserve. From your perspective, you're securing your group's metabolic future. Both sides believe they're acting from necessity. Now here's something people often misunderstand. Ancient contests for resources probably didn't look like the cinematic set pieces you see in films. No massive formations. No thousands of combatants across open ground. Most groups were small. Pressure was probably applied through quick incursions. Surgical resource extractions, small-scale raids, move in, extract, disappear. Avoid overexposure. Because no group could afford sustained demographic losses, even temporary displacement of key members. Now let's talk about reciprocity. Because once a territorial breach occurs, it rarely ends with a single action. Imagine one skilled forager from your tribe is no longer part of your active workforce, perhaps taken, perhaps separated, perhaps unable to return. His family remembers the absence. Years later, another opportunity arises. Someone from your group reclaims what was taken. Now the opposing collective has suffered a similar structural gap. They remember too. Soon, nobody recalls exactly what triggered the initial breach, only that some form of balance must be restored. This cyclical pattern appears throughout human history. Here's another reason territorial posture mattered. Reputation. Imagine every neighboring collective knows your people never mount a response to incursions. What happens? You become a critical vulnerability. Food stores can be seized, territorial boundaries breached, juvenile members taken. But if every neighboring collective knows your group responds with overwhelming structural force, many incursions never materialize. Sometimes the credible threat of intergroup response prevents intergroup response itself. Now here's something fascinating about human psychology. Humans are extraordinarily capable of internal synchronization. That's one reason our species achieved such global dominance. But cooperation has a hidden side. The stronger the cohesive bond inside your own kinship web, the easier it becomes to cognitively distance those outside it. Us and them. Trust your immediate circle. Trust your tribe. Maintain vigilance around strangers. But when environmental resources contract, vigilance can curdle into active opposition. And opposition can escalate into sustained intergroup pressure. Of course, ancient humans didn't spend all their time under that kind of strain. Far from it. They exchanged lithic tools, shared tactical knowledge about the landscape, found reproductive partners in neighboring bands, transmitted innovations. If humans had done nothing but engage in confrontation, civilization would never have taken root. Cooperation always outweighed conflict in the long-term survival calculus. That's why the archaeological record tells such a layered story. Some regions show repeated traumatic deposition. Others show centuries of stable, non-confrontational coexistence. Different ecological zones created different stress thresholds. A fertile territory with abundant seasonal yield encourages mutual aid. A resource-scarce environment compresses decision-making into much sharper trade-offs. So why did ancient humans engage in organized intergroup pressure? The honest answer is that they probably did so for many of the same pressures that still exist today. To shield their kinship unit, to defend critical terrain, to secure caloric supply, to restore balance after a previous breach, to maintain collective integrity. The instruments were simpler, the population units were smaller, but the underlying emotional circuitry was remarkably familiar. Fear, anticipation, grief, loyalty, affiliation. And maybe that's the strangest part of the entire story. When we imagine ancient humans in hostile engagements, it's easy to picture anonymous adversaries clashing across some forgotten landscape. But every individual carrying a thrusting spear had someone waiting for them beside the communal fire. Someone they aimed to preserve. Someone they expected to rejoin. Hostile engagement has transformed enormously over tens of thousands of years. Lithic points became bronze blades. Bronze became steel. Steel became high-velocity projectiles. And eventually, guided delivery systems. But beneath every instrument of leverage humanity has ever devised lies the same fundamental question our ancestors faced long before written records existed. How far will a group go to protect the ones they are bound to? For as long as humans have aggregated into communities, we've been negotiating that answer. Sometimes through balanced reciprocity, sometimes through coercive pressure, and almost always with the underlying expectation that the next seasonal cycle would be marginally less precarious than the last.